Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another day of virtual Bible. I know some of you are probably tired of the quarantine. Hopefully, we'll be done with this thing, and this virus will be out very soon. But if not, we're going to continue to meet here. I'm hoping that we can get back to class and continue our Bible shenanigans. I miss our conversations and some of your off the wall insight and some of your really good insight that you have into the Bible. But today is not going to be very long because we're at the end of Solomon's life. And what we're going to find today is that with Solomon, even though he started really, really, really well, like his father, he ended up on a bad path. And it didn't end well for him or his family. You got to remember that when we make mistakes, sometimes our mistakes can cost other people. And that's what we're going to see in today's story. So let's look at Solomon's fall and his death for just a moment. Um, Solomon's one purpose that he had was to build the temple of God in Israel. And he did that. He put it right in the heart of Jerusalem. Took him years, but he built these treaties. He created new ways to build things. And this temple was beautiful and it was massive, as you guys saw in the last lecture. And so we have this massive temple being built. It now gave people of Israel, the Jews had a central place of worship, a place to gather. They'd go for Passover there. So this is a really, really, really big deal. Solomon would continue to use the wisdom that he asked God to give him to the advantage of the people. And so he was making really good decisions. And we saw just in the last lecture as well how much money was actually coming in the weight of gold every year to Israel. So he was super wealthy. As a matter of fact, this morning, right before I recorded, I just wanted to take a look and see if you took the currency of that time period of Solomon and did the math to today's currency, what would the net worth of Solomon be? So if you just took the amount of gold that came in, the mathematicians believe that Solomon would have had a net worth today in today's economy. He would have been worth somewhere around $2 trillion. So let that sink in. That will just show you how much of a blessing that Israel was getting, that everything was going the way it was supposed to, because as long as Israel followed God, they received the blessing that God had for them. But the moment they backed off of that, things begin to go downhill. And so that's what we see here at the end of Solomon's life. His home began to be turned into the one where he had many, many wives. Like he was marrying multiple women, had multiple uh, wives everywhere. Now, the problem with that is many of these women that he married didn't believe in the same God that he believed in. And this caused some issues because many of these women were worshiping false gods of from other countries. And you know what happened in the history of Israel? When everything goes well, they still had um, this desire to want to go back to false gods. And think about it. Everything they looked at around them, they had everything they needed as a country, but they still went back to the things that were going to cause them harm by going back to false gods. They never truly found contentment and joy in God. They would try to find it in other places. And this even goes for Solomon. And so he went against the better judgment that he knew was right. And the city that had the temple built in it, that was a central place of worship, has now been corrupted by high places of worship for false gods. You can worship the God Jehovah, or you could go worship any other God. They were soon to look just like all the other nations around them. And so all these wives that Solomon had eventually turned his heart towards other gods as well. So you remember in the very beginning, it said Solomon's heart was just like his father. He was serving God, following God, doing everything he could for God. Now his heart has been turned towards other gods. So he's now in idolatry. Think back through the book of Judges, and remember Judges and all these books and Kings and Solomon and First Samuel. All these books kind of overlay each other, and this is that cycle of sin that we were talking about that happened in Judges. We're seeing it right here play out in the Old Testament. So his heart goes towards other gods. Now he loves Jehovah God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he also now loves the gods of the other countries. And so for this reason, God became angry with Solomon. He was very disappointed with Solomon. And he announced that the kingdom was going to be divided under his son. Right? So he tells Solomon that now Instead of having all of Israel to reign over and to be king over, I'm now going to divide this kingdom. So there's a consequence for your sin. And the sin is your son will not be able to reign as king in the same way that you did. So I'm going to cut his kingdom in half. Now remember, there were 12 tribes. Okay? There were 12. And the kingdom was going to be divided. And one person we're going to see in just a minute named Jeroboam. Jeroboam was given 10 tribes. Now he wasn't kin, he wasn't a son of Solomon. The other 2 tribes is what Solomon got. A pretty harsh punishment. He no longer gets the rule over these 12 tribes of Israel. He only gets 2 because of his father's sin. So the 10 tribes are given to Jeroboam. Now this didn't sit well with Solomon. Remember, Solomon was a very wise guy, in the very beginning loved God. But look what we find in chapter 11 of verse 40. It says that Solomon attempted to murder Jeroboam. Now, doesn't this sound familiar? Because Solomon probably had heard the story at some point of his father David, when David tried to murder Bathsheba's husband to cover up a sin of his when she became pregnant. So he is following in his father's footsteps. The only difference is there is repentance with David. We don't see that here with Solomon. So Solomon attempts to murder Jeroboam. Now, how did that work out? It didn't. It didn't work. So Jeroboam will go on to become king of 12 of the 10 tribes, while Solomon's son Rehoboam will go on to be the king of 2 of the tribes. So this is the part that we don't want to get confused. You've got Jeroboam, no kin to Solomon, and Rehoboam, who's kin to Solomon. Jeroboam, 10 tribes, Rehoboam, 2 tribes. And so at the end of his life, 40 years, Solomon reigns. Solomon dies. He's buried somewhere in Jerusalem, in the city of David, his father. So he's buried in the city of his father. And Rehoboam, his son, is going to reign in his place. Now, this is going to cause some very complicated matters going forward, where we have a unified nation, a unified country of Israel. Now it's going to be divided, and it's going to have 2 kings, and these people are going to go back and forth with one another, and this is not going to go well. Everybody's now going to pay the consequence for Solomon's sin of idolatry, but eventually it's all going to come back. So when we get to the next chapter, what we're going to start seeing is we're going to be operating on 2 different kingdoms. We're going to find a southern kingdom and a northern kingdom. So this is where the hierarchy of kingship here in Israel is going to change, and it's going to change rapidly, and it's not going to go for the better for many places. Okay, so that is what our lecture is today. So now your job is to go into Bible folder and take your quiz there. We've had some issues with the quizzes, so you may be typing the right answer and it may be marking it wrong. Do not fail or fear in that, because what I have found is if for some reason you don't capitalize the first letter, it wants to mark it wrong. So in all, just know that I'm going back and manually checking those things. So don't have a cow if it says that you missed it, even though you typed in the right answer. We got you. Should you be using notes on these quizzes? It's totally fine. If you take your notes like you're supposed to, then that's the benefit of what you're doing. Please keep in mind that once we return back to normal schedule and we see each other face to face, I am going to be checking your notebooks to make sure that you did indeed take notes throughout this process. So whether you're typing them or if you're handwriting them, that is fine. And we'll accept those. Hey, I am so ready to get back and be with you guys. But in the meantime, let's get this quiz taken, and we'll see you on the next video.